This one's pretty big. We have an election overturned by a judge because Democrats were caught stuffing the ballot. Now, the interesting thing here, it's a Bridgeport, Connecticut mayoral primary, and it's really close to the election. A lot of people are making the argument, well, it's just a small election. These things happen. No one ever said fraud never happens, but let's talk about where we're currently at. The game being played to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president is getting very interesting. The Colorado trial is on. They actually played a clip from Timcast during the trial, and that's in Colorado. We also have the Minnesota trial has begun with very interesting and intelligent arguments made, which argue states do not have the right to determine eligibility. This needs to be a federal question. However, Trump was already tried federally, the impeachment hearings, and he was acquitted. Now, as for this smaller town and this election fraud story, why it matters. In this instance, we have a single individual seen on camera stuffing the ballots. And that was enough for a judge to say, okay, this calls everything into question. We don't know the true numbers. We've got to do it again. Now, you'd think that if we know Democrats have done this or do it, well, then what about Trump's arguments about fraud in 2020? Well, I'll tell you. Most of the lawsuits that were brought up questioning several instances much like this were determined to have no standing, which seems like BS, if you ask me. Now, I personally don't think Trump lost 2020 because of ballot stuffing or things like this. I certainly think it happened. I think even Bill Barr, who many people don't like, said, yeah, fraud happened, but was it enough to actually affect the outcome? It might have been, but I lean towards probably not. And the issue is just, they admit what they did, okay? Ballot harvesting. Now, the question is, were they legitimate ballots from real people that were harvested? And then we have questions of how the rules are being set up to disfavor Donald Trump. To put it simply, the big narrative about fraudulent ballots and fake printed ones, I'm just like, look, no, I'm not interested. Okay. No, I've read a lot of these stories and I think they're too speculative. Now, the stories about ballot harvesting, I think, are legitimate. And so the issue comes down to this. Is it fraud if someone goes and collects ballots from a bunch of old people who are not really all with it, and they say, just sign it, just sign it? We've seen those videos from James O'Keefe. Is that fraud? Well, legally speaking, in many of these states, it is not. It's not. So there are some deep questions, and we're going to get into this. But my point is simply this. When it came to Donald Trump's legal hearings, what they said in the cases where there was an actual ruling on the merits, guess what? Trump actually won. Yeah, they found that there were some really interesting things about ballot stuffing and things like this. The problem was, at an individual level, these instances did not amount to a significant enough amount of fraud to have altered the outcome of the election. Therefore, moot was the ruling. If you're saying Trump lost by 3,000 votes and you found someone who's stuffed, 400 ballots, doesn't change the outcome. There's no point. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It is lazy. It is immoral. Judges should absolutely say, in this instance, we must take action because it is not the macro, it is the micro. If you get 100 instances of, what do they call it? I forgot what it's called. When someone carries more than the legal number of ballots for individuals and stuffs them. If you get one case and they prove it and they say, yeah, well, it's not enough. Okay, but what if you have 10 in each of these different areas and each judge says none of it is enough? It's the micro, not the macro. This plays a role. So I want to talk to you about this story and bring up the importance of whether or not you think this is how Trump lost in 2020. It's much more complicated. And let me walk you through it. In the early days after the 2020 election, people were claiming Trump was still the president who was going to get reinstated. Just weird nonsense. People were claiming that there were Chinese servers and hacking and votes flipping. People were claiming that China printed fake ballots and that Trump had watermarked them and they were going to catch him and then Trump was going to be reinstated. Look, and I'm like, none of that is true, guys. Then Time Magazine releases their article, The Shadow Campaign. And this is where we get into the question of rigging and fraud and what it means. First, did Donald Trump win in 2020? No. Simply put, Joe Biden's in the White House. If you think win means get a bunch of votes or have the support, fine. But I'm talking about actual conflict. What's the real victory? Joe Biden became president. What do we know they did? Changed the rules and ballot harvested. And that was the bulk of how they pulled off 2020. And this is not conspiracy theory. The shadow campaign article published by Time magazine outlined exactly what they did. And it probably involves things like this. Now, is ballot stuffing fraud? Depends on your jurisdiction. Some places allow people to do this. So my point is simply this. This should be litigated. It should not be allowed. One person, one vote. You should have to deliver your ballots on your own. And we should not allow these kinds of things. In this jurisdiction, what this woman did, fraud. But it's not fraud in every single jurisdiction. Or I should say, based on the determination of the judge, it would appear this woman committed fraud. I don't know the actual legal statute, so I want to be careful. But let's read this, and we'll talk about it. Connecticut Judge William Clark overturned the results of Bridgeport's Democratic mayoral primary on Wednesday after a video emerged showing a supporter of current Mayor Joe Ganim allegedly stuffing ballots into an absentee ballot drop box. Let me just set the record straight on what I'm saying. It is an allegation of ballot stuffing, but the judge made a determination. I think thus it is fair to say as a statement of fact. I don't know how else you determine statements of facts. If a judge said it, then it must be true. Or we operate under the assumption it is. Judges can be wrong. The videos, Clark said, are shocking to the court and should be shocking to all parties. Clark ordered the parties to confer with each other and with election officials within 10 days to discuss scheduling a new primary. This is mere days before the November 7th election day. Clark overturned the results, saying that these allegations were enough to throw out the primary results. In that September 12th primary, incumbent Ganim won by 251 votes out of a total of 8,173 per Connecticut Public. What really sealed the deal for Clark, however, is that Ganim's win was secure by absentee ballots in his favor. The volume of ballots so mishandled is such that it calls the results of the primary election into serious doubt and leaves the court unable to determine the legitimate result of the primary. The surveillance video was obtained by Ganim's opposition candidate, John Gomes. The Gomes campaign sued the city and demanded the results be thrown out and a new primary be scheduled or to be declared the winner himself. A new primary date has not been announced, and if Ganim loses the general election next week, a new primary may not be set at all. Gomes, who won the endorsement of a minority party, is also on the ballot. You see how this is going? While many people are like, they threw it out, dude is still going to be on the general ballot, and if he wins, it doesn't matter. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason I bring this up is for a few reasons. What really matters is, do we have elections? And the answer is no. Does that mean you should not vote? No. You need to go and vote. And listen, I need to break it down for you, okay? Elections are a group of people get together. Let's say we got 6 chairs at the Timcast table. 6 chairs. Okay, you see them on IRL. We need a wide shot so you can see how big it is. And we all say, what's for dinner? And then everyone says, I would choose, someone says beef, pork, chicken. And we got 2 for beef, 2 for pork, and 2 for chicken. And it's indeterminate. Like we can't figure it out. We're going to have to have another, we're going to have to do another ballot. Then we get 3 for chicken. Oh, there it is. 1 for pork, 2 for beef. All right. And that sets it. The election happened. Okay. Now that's an election. What we have in the United States is a game. It's more of a game of ballots. Who can convince the public they won the most? That's the game we are playing. You voting plays a massive role in whether or not we can convince the public that we won. So you should. But understand what this means. Let's play this game. John Gomes posts this video of a woman ballot stuffing. How many ballots do we know? Perhaps in the case, they did determine how many ballots were stuffed. Okay. And then the judge says, well, we don't know who won then. What if, let's say this, John Doe and Jane Doe are running against each other. John Doe, the incumbent, is about to win when all of a sudden a video emerges of someone ballot stuffing. And this person appears to be a supporter of John Doe. Well, then there's a lawsuit and they say, look, this looks like a John Doe supporter stuffing the ballots. We're going to have a new primary. And then the reveal. Jane Doe hires the person to ballot stuff for them, but using a supporter of the other guy who's willing to take a little green. And thus, if they don't pull off enough votes, they can contest the election claiming. You see how this works? Let me just break it down in terms of this. This woman is apparently a supporter of the incumbent. But what if she's just a corrupt worker? Sure, she supported the incumbent, and then someone came and said, 10 grand if you put these ballots in the box. Then the person running as the newcomer could then say, see, look, aha, when in fact it was a false flag the entire time. We don't know. All we know is it's indeterminate, right? We do not know who won, and thus, welcome to the modern state of American elections. That does not mean to sit idle. It means you need to get everyone imaginable to go vote. But let's talk about where we're currently at with Donald Trump. Well, we have Colorado going on, and we have Minnesota happening. And an amazing, very, very interesting argument. I believe this is Trump's lawyer or a lawyer in defense of Trump running. And an interesting point was made. Interesting argument. I tweeted this just so I could have the collection of thoughts as I was watching it live. The lawyer argues the Constitution does not give states the right to determine who is eligible for an election. Arguably, this would mean a 14th Amendment eligibility case would have to be federal, a federal court, not state level. So Colorado's suit, Michigan's and Minnesota are moot. The state does not have the right to determine. Though the Constitution does say that state legislatures run the elections, states do not determine eligibility. That's brilliant. I agree. The Constitution at the federal level determines who is eligible, right? Okay. This would mean even if you think Trump is an insurrectionist, there has to be a determination by the federal courts. And if the states are removing a candidate, and this is unheard of. Look. The argument they made, if someone is 27, you don't need a federal hearing to determine eligibility because there's no fact finding. Excuse me. Basically, everybody knows they're 27 and you got to be 35. Insurrection, however, is disputed. That would require a federal case to determine whether the candidate was actually ineligible. If states can determine eligibility, it basically nullifies the purpose of an election. If every state determined eligibility, then there would be no elections anymore, just blue state single party rule and red state single party rule. Elections would just become eligibility hearings where the votes from the public do not matter. Now that's interesting. Now let's be real. It does not matter what's true. It does not matter what must be upheld. All that matters today is that we are dealing with power versus power. The community of the United States is dead. The willingness to work together is gone. You now have two factions, the crackpot evil cult and everyone else. My favorite part, I mean, if you've done any amount of digging and looking into the culture war, then you know what I'm saying. Maybe a little crass, but it's true. They would say Tim Pool far right, despite having leftist opinions on certain issues. And they say Hassan Piker calls Ian Crossland a conservative. Ian Crossland is very far from conservative. Very far. Especially when he said Palestine should be the 51st state of the United States. And he seriously meant it. Yeah, we try to be an eclectic bunch of varying ideas to solve problems. But the left is a cult. That's why they don't allow interviews. And this is the issue today. The judges in this case don't care what matters. They care about winning. That's it. So you can make all the arguments in the world that you want. It's not going to matter. So here's where we are. If Colorado, Minnesota, Michigan, any one of these states determines Trump to be ineligible, there will never be an election again. You know why? Oh, we'll have our elections. They'll be like North Korea, but let me lay it down for you. You get a swing state, but some of these swing states have Republican-controlled legislatures or Democrat-controlled legislatures. Okay, so what'll happen is they will start getting ready for the election. A lawsuit will happen a year in advance, like we're seeing now, and they'll say John Doe is not eligible to run under these provisions. And the state will just say, you know what, we agree. And they remove the front runner for one political party from the ballot. That's it. Oh, you can go out and cast your ballot all day and night, and you can write in Donald Trump if you want, but he'll never appear on the ballot again. Blue states and blue-leaning swing states will make sure that Trump does not appear on the ballot if states are allowed to determine eligibility. In 20 years, that's all it'll be. Because that's the lawfare, and that's the way you win. Donald Trump won in 2016 by targeting the Electoral College. They complained, but he didn't win the popular vote. He says that's not what it takes to win. If Trump said, if I wanted to win the popular vote, I would have gone for the popular vote. No, I went for the Electoral College. He went for the message that would resonate in the states he needed to win the Electoral College, and it worked. Because elections are not about getting the majority of the popular vote. If it comes down to this, and these courts agree with the Democrats, it's done. What the Democrats are doing is destroying this country. No question. Oh, they'll say Trump tried waging an insurrection. Okay, well, Trump had his hearing in federal government and they acquitted him. Have a nice day. Yeah, but that was Republicans who could. No, you needed 2/3 representation. You needed 2/3 of Senate to agree Trump did something, and they did not. So it's in dispute. Thus, there is no federal determination as to whether or not Trump committed an insurrection other than to say he was acquitted of doing it and therefore eligible to be president. The Democrats then say we're going to the states, but the states don't have the right to make that determination. The federal Constitution does. That's it. These judges, if they agree with the Democrats, every election from now on will have to be an eligibility hearing where judges and wealthy individuals decide amongst themselves if you, an American, are allowed to appear on the ballot. And guess what? You won't be. We have a clip that, let me see where I have it pulled up. This is from Timcast IRL Uncensored with J.R. Majewski, who breaks down how they cheated. And I want to play for you this clip. It's 6 minutes long. And the reason I'm doing it is because it did not appear on YouTube. It was the uncensored Timcast portion of the show. And so, well, I think you should just go to follow Raymond G. Stanley on Twitter. He's got the clip. I retweeted it as well. It's 6 minutes long, so I don't want to play the whole thing, but I'll give you the breakdown. J.R. Majewski served in Afghanistan. He served in Qatar, and he recently, this is what he says, received the Global War on Terror medal. He was leading in his district when he says Kevin McCarthy teamed up with a Democrat to spike and sabotage his campaign. They pulled his records, ran a fake story claiming that he did not actually serve in Afghanistan and lied. This is his story. And this caused him to tank in the polls and ultimately resulted in his defeat. And then only after did it come out, no, he did serve. And they lied. And Kevin McCarthy was working with them to stop him. Why? Because this guy is America first. This is an American who wants to run, and he's not a political class elite. The Republicans and the Democrats would love for the states to determine eligibility. And this is where we're at. When it comes to federal governance, the federal Constitution dictates. But imagine this. J.R. Majewski says, I'm going to run for Congress. And they say, okay, first, the eligibility hearing. Are you, in fact, eligible to run? Oh, sorry, this court finds you're not. That's it. What ends up happening is the ballots will just be Democrat. That's it. Republicans will not fight back. They will struggle to engage in any kind of meaningful lawfare like they do now. And every election will be, you'll go to your local polling place and you'll look at the ballot and it'll say for president, Democrat, nothing else. No, they'll have their mock candidates. Come on, North Korea does this too. We know China, they have elections. Actually, I don't think China does. But North Korea has elections. Nobody believes they're real elections because you can't vote for anybody else. And then they're like 100% approval. They have the fake candidate. The dictator will have the fake candidate be like, I think we have to do this. And then everyone will clap and cheer. And then the fake candidate loses and says, well, it's an honor and a privilege to have run. You're the best. But it's fake. And that's what you'll get. You'll get your stock Mitt Romney Republican. And they'll be like, this is the eligible Republican. So we're putting him on the ballot. And there it is. This is why we need to pay attention. This is why we need to ramp up lawfare. This is why you need to vote. Now, some people believe because of widespread fraud, there's no reason to vote. I think there's a lot of fraud. I do. I don't believe that fraud is the determinant factor in, we got to clarify this. It's so annoying when people are like, because These people believe that China made fake ballots. Okay, fraud is like fake ballots. Someone ballot stuffing, is it fraud? I don't think they even said it was fraud in this trial. The point is, fraud is usually deceiving for some gain, right? If someone fabricates ballots, yes, fraud. Does fraud exist? Yes, it does. Does voter fraud happen? It absolutely does. Some of these people have been caught. Some people use fraud to mean a wide range of things like ballot harvesting. But in most states, ballot harvesting is legal. There are limitations in some states on how many you're allowed to harvest. That is the question. Then it becomes, is that fraud? If your argument is voter fraud is anything outside of the confines of the rules of elections in which you act to gain votes, then yes, it would be. I'm trying to be careful and use more legal distinction of manipulation and deception. So is it illegal ballot harvesting? Then yes. I don't know that we have that. There was actually a hearing where you actually had a Republican being like, guys, stop. It's not illegal. They were like, but look at this video. They're putting a bunch of ballots in a box. And he's like, yes, they're allowed to do that. If you don't want them doing it, pass legislation. But in a lot of these states, they go to nursing homes. They ask these people, oh, you want to vote? So I think the solution is simple. It's very simple. One person, one vote. Everybody has to deliver their votes themselves. That's it. No absentee ballots only in extreme circumstances like military service. That's it. But I'm not going to sit here, and convince everybody. I can only tell you this. If these cases are not stopped, the Trump eligibility cases, if they are not quashed immediately, if they result in Trump being removed from a single state, you will never have an election again. You will only ever then have eligibility hearings. And that'll be your future. Every president who wants to run will be like, November, the year before the election, is eligibility season. That's when we got to really ramp up our defenses as to why we're eligible to be president. And then you'll have to convince a judge to let you on the ballot. That's insane. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.